Hey, my name is Bay. I'm one of the filmmakers at Valve. Before coming here, a lot of us have worked on big-budget blockbuster movies. During those experiences, we realized that movies could be made much more efficiently and with more creative freedom. So we joined Valve, and for the last 7 years, we've been creating movies in a very different way. I'm going to talk to you today about a storytelling tool that we built inside Valve's Source engine. We condensed the entire pipeline of an animation studio down onto a single gaming PC. We're calling it the Source FilmMaker. To date, we've created over 50 animated shorts. You may recognize a few of them. These have actually served a dual purpose for us. The first is to be the marketing materials for our various games, and the second has actually been to be the technology test for the Source FilmMaker. For a while now, it's clear that gamers like to do more than just play games. We all like to watch movies, and we like to participate in the worlds that we spend so much time in. We built the Source FilmMaker so that we could efficiently share our creative efforts across all aspects of the entertainment experience. This means that we created all of our movies on location inside the video game world. While the movie's playing back, we can pause, reach into the frame, and change something. That's not a 2D video that you're looking at. You're looking at the 3D world of the video game. This allows us to combine the arts of cinematography, film editing, and animation so that we can make late project story changes. We can blade a shot, frame the camera, and change the meaning of a scene immediately.
Did anyone happen to kill a red spy on the way here? No? Then we still have a problem.
So let's take a deeper look at the character animation tools inside the SFM. You can capture motion, you can insert clip motion, or you can animate new motion from scratch. No matter how the motion was created, you can use powerful motion editors to modify any of it.
And worst of all, he could be any one of us.
The Source FilmMaker also features a GPU-powered facial animation system that allows for multiple characters to deliver subtle, nuanced facial performances with feature film quality lip sync.
Basically, kind of a big deal.
So let's show you what it's like to use the Source FilmMaker. Normally, a film director yells lights, camera, action. The Source FilmMaker, however, allows us to do this backwards. Action, camera, light. So here you can see a group of us is using the multiplayer game to mock in an idea that we had for Meet the Medic. The Source FilmMaker allows us to capture the game world, blade up shots, place cameras, add anything in the game world, pose characters, perform facial animation, reperform a new take, tune lights, and adjust sound, all without leaving the context of what it looks like for the final audience. All this means that you can think of these video game worlds as massive backlots for creative exploration. As contributors to the Steam Workshop continue to expand these worlds, the resources for storytellers are going to increase exponentially. With the Source FilmMaker, you can animate, create posters, and make movies, all by repurposing the video game world into a virtual movie studio. Today, we're pleased to announce that we're starting the beta of the Source FilmMaker so that you can start making your own animated movies. We're also going to be including the working session of Meet the Heavy so that you can reshoot, reanimate, and re-edit it to make it your own. You can learn more at sourcefilmmaker.com. Hey, my name is Bay, and today I'm going to show you how to use the 3D world of Team Fortress 2 to create your own animated short film. We're going to use a tool that I work on called the Source FilmMaker. So let's begin. The first time you launch the SFM, you're going to see a setup window. This allows you to open up a recent session, create a new session from scratch, or browse for an existing session from your hard drive. Each movie created in the SFM is stored inside these session files. So for this tutorial, let's go ahead and create a new session. Go ahead and click on Create. You're going to get 3 windows: the animation set editor, the primary viewport, and the timeline. And in the middle of the primary viewport, you should see some bright red text that says No Map Loaded. Congratulations, you've done everything right. The reason you're seeing this is because the SFM needs to have a video game map loaded for you to be able to do anything. Go ahead and right-click in the viewport and choose Load Map. By default, you're going to get a big list of all of the maps that are currently sunk to your machine. There's some filters up here. This one filters by mod. By default, it's on all mods. And down on the bottom here is a little text field. I know that the map that I want to use is called CP Mountain Lab, so if I just type MOUN, you can see that it shows me just the things that have MOUN in the name. So I can see that CP Mountain Lab is selected and click on Open. It'll take a second for that level to load, and while it's doing so, I'm going to show you a little bit about some of the UI that you might need to pay attention to. On the very bottom here, there's a game timer, which basically shows you the time that the game currently thinks that it is, so it counts up. There's also this memory footprint section, which tells you how much memory that we're using. So currently we're using about 1300 megs. And then there's the frames per second. So it looks like the map is loaded, so let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create a camera. We have a shot selected, but there's no camera for this shot. Down here on the bottom right of the primary viewport, you'll see a button that says No Camera. On the right of that, there's a little pull down here, this little down arrow. So if we click on that, you can see a menu of camera operations. We're going to go down to Change Scene Camera, New Camera. Now you can see that the camera button says Camera 1. So if we click and drag in the viewport now, if I just drag to the right, you can sort of look around and see that we've got a map. If I hold down the W key, I can move forward, and if I hold down the S key, I can move backwards. Now bear in mind, this is while I'm dragging, so I actually have to hold the mouse down and then hold the W key down at the same time. If I hold down the A key, I can go to the left. If I hold down the D key, I can go to the right. If I hold down the Z key, I can go up. And if I hold down the X key, I can go down. There's also the R key for roll and mouse wheel to zoom in or zoom out. And you can do all these things at the same time so that you can sort of fly around just like you would inside the game. So let's go ahead and follow this dirt path down the road here. And so this is a community map that was made as part of an art pass contest. I thought it was a really good little spot that we could use for getting started in this tutorial. We do a lot of camera puppeteering, so it's a good idea to really master how to use the camera so that you can get around very precisely.
You can also slow down the camera motion by holding down the Control key or tapping the Shift key to accelerate.
For those of you familiar with 3D modeling or animation systems,
Hold down the Alt button and left drag on the viewport and you can orbit the camera. Alt middle drag will pan and Alt right drag will dolly in and out.
this is basically because we know that for sometimes when you're animating or working on a pose or working on a piece, you want to be able to orbit around something like I am this light. And you can think of it as a turntable like a sculptor would use to basically spin something around, or a tripod where you're looking around, and it's basically just different ways of dealing with the mouse input. It's a good idea to take some time and really master this, because the key to making good movies is often good camera work and being able to move around the scene in a very comfortable way. So we tried to combine the best of movie making and animation with what players are already familiar with in gameplay, and we thought this worked pretty well. So I think what I'm going to use is this little section here where this orange truck is, and I want the scout to come and run around this little area here. So we're going to do that in a later tutorial, but for right now, I want to show you how to set up a camera and then be able to still work with the scene without messing up that camera. So this is where camera 1 is placed, sort of aiming at this truck, but let's say we wanted to go and look at the truck's tire without messing up the camera.
So to do that, we're going to use the work camera. Now before we switch to the work camera, we need to copy the current view into it. To do this, hold down Control and click on the camera button. Notice that the text switches to say work camera. By doing that, you've copied this view to the work camera. So now the work camera is able to come over here and look at the truck's tire, but when I click the camera button toggle, it goes back to the scene camera, so I can toggle back and forth between the two and not have to worry about messing up my scene camera. So left click toggles between the work camera and the active camera, and Control left click will copy the active camera to the work camera.
So that's the basics of working with a camera. Let's talk a little bit about working with time. Down here in the timeline, there's two ways of scrubbing time. You can grab the top of this blue thing, which is called the playhead, and just drag it left and right, and that scrubs time. You can also grab the film strip and throw it underneath the playhead. And you can also hit the spacebar to play, or click on the play button up here on the time transport controls. Mouse wheel will zoom out or zoom in. It always zooms around the playhead, so wherever the playhead is, that's where it's going to zoom to. Because the playhead gets used for a lot of different operations, we tend to use Control spacebar to review our work. This will play the existing shot once, and then will return the playhead back to its current frame. This will come in handy later. Up arrow goes to the beginning of a shot, and down arrow goes to the end of the shot. So if you have a lot of shots, this is how you navigate the sequence. And then see, down here on the bottom where the playhead is square, if you click and drag that, it pans the whole view. It doesn't actually change time, it just changes the panning, and sometimes that's handy for being able to see areas outside the end of the view. You can also click and drag in the ruler here to make the time jump to that location.
and there's playback, loop, and bounce here for playback controls. So that's how to sort of control time. This is how to control the view. So go ahead and play around with it, get comfortable, and in the next tutorial we'll talk about how to actually put some things into the shot. And don't forget, hit Control S to save your work. So now that we've learned how to work with the camera and work with time, let's talk a little bit about working back and forth between the movie world and the game world. So there's a hotkey, F11, which will switch you back and forth between game and movie world. So basically hit the F11 key to go into the game, and then when you're in the game, hit the F11 key to go back into the movie world. In the movie world, you can move the mouse around, you can select shots, you can throw time, you can scrub time, you can use the file menu. It works just like a normal tool. When you hit F11, however, the cursor is stuck to the middle of the screen and you can shoot at it with left click and do all the things that you normally do inside of TF. So since we're using our players as actors, we have to go and get into places before we can actually start recording. So I'm going to go ahead and run the scout all the way across the map. And I thought that this little area here by the truck would be a good little spot for us to work with. And I thought that maybe we could record the scout running down this little dirt path. So go ahead and hit F11. You'll notice that the scout has disappeared. Even though in the game world we were clearly standing right there, he's gone. That's because for something to show up inside of a shot, it has to be recorded. Just like a video camera has to capture somebody to put it onto tape. And so to do that, we're going to go ahead and click the record button and go ahead and click on record. You'll hear 3 beeps. And at the end of the 4th beep, you can go ahead and start running. That means that the tape is rolling. And so let's go ahead and run up to here and then hit escape when you're done. So you can see here that we're inside the tool mode, and when you hit the space bar, you'll see everything that we just did got recorded into the shot. When we get to the far end over here, we're going to go ahead and stop time with the space bar again and go down here and click on your shot and hit the O key to set the out point for that shot. Notice that the sequence has this long strip of black here. You can go and click and drag it, or you can hit Alt-O, which will set the sequence to be the same as the current playhead. Go ahead and zoom in a little bit so you can sort of frame it there. Hit the up arrow to go to the beginning of the shot and hit F11. Now note that we're all the way on the other side of the map because that's where we were at the end of the last take. So we need to go back and get in places. When we get back to the starting point, you'll see the other scout from our previous take is standing there waiting for us. We can't actually interact with him, kill him, or shoot him because he's actually not there in the game world. He's only a movie puppet. He's being driven by animation channels controlled by the timeline instead of being controlled by game logic. To see an example of this, hit F11 and go ahead and hit play, and quickly hit F11 again. You can see that the scout is actually running away, and we're still able to just ignore him, and he's going to go and do what the movie clock tells him to do. So let's go ahead and chase him around. Hit F11, click on the record button here, click record, and listen for the beeps. And there we go. So I'm basically recording myself twice. Get to the end of the shot, and you'll hear some beeps again. This is telling you that the shot is ending, and it's going to return you to the movie mode. This is because it only records the duration of the selected shot when you hit record. If you make a mistake, just right-click on the shot and go to Cleanup, Manage Takes. You'll see that there's the 2 takes that we just recorded. Select the second one and click on Delete. I'm going to go ahead and undo that since I want to keep that take. So hit Control-Z and the take will come back. So go ahead and hit play, and you can see here's our little sequence. So this scene might be a little bit more exciting if we recorded a soldier shooting some rockets. So let's run over here where the scouts were when they ran past this corner. And if we hit 5 on the number pad, it'll switch back and forth to the first person view. Hit period and select the red team and select the soldier. You'll see that the scout died. And when the soldier respawns, he's probably going to respawn inside the red spawn room. So we're going to go ahead and need to get him into places. So instead of running all the way across the map, I'm going to show you a trick where we're going to go ahead and teleport him using the scene camera. So go ahead and hit F11, right-click in the primary viewport, and go down to Game, Teleport Player to Camera. You can see the player has teleported right here behind the scout, so we're already in position and everything's ready to roll. So go ahead and get into places, hit F11, click the record button, listen for the beeps, start shooting some rockets, and there we go.
By the way, when you teleport yourself, you can sometimes get accidentally stuck inside walls or the floor. Just go ahead and tap the N key for no clip, and then you can fly through walls, and then hit N when you're in midair, and you'll drop back down onto the world. So you'll notice that the active camera got set to be unnamed camera 3, which is the soldier camera. So I'm going to go ahead and bring down the menu and change scene camera to be unnamed camera 2, which is the scout. Go ahead and hit play. Looks like we've got a pretty exciting action shot. So let's go ahead and cut it up into a sequence. And don't forget, hit Control S to save your work. Okay, so now that we've made a good little action shot, let's go ahead and talk about editing and how to cut up this shot into a sequence. For the most part in the SFM, you're going to want to go ahead and make a master shot that has all the pieces that you need in it before you start cutting it up. This is because it'll save you some time organization-wise to make sure that all the action is there every time you blade or copy the shot. So go ahead and hit the space bar. And somewhere around here where the rocket is passing us, let's go ahead and select the shot in the middle here and hit B for blade. And this is the most common way to create a new shot. You'll notice it took the entire shot that we had covering the whole sequence and cut it into 2 shots. So the first shot that we had from before is still here, but now it's half as long. And now we have a new shot that starts at that same location. Go ahead and select shot 2 and drag the playhead so it's inside the selected shot. Note that if you click and drag in the viewport right now, it won't do anything because the camera is being controlled by animation curves. We'll talk more about this later. For now, let's go ahead and create a new camera and place it somewhere else in the world. Each time you blade, you're making a copy of the shot. So the camera 1 that we made right before we recorded the scout running is still there. Let's go ahead and set that to be the active camera and move it somewhere else in the world. Click down on the camera button and choose camera 1. Now we can just click and drag in the viewport to move the camera again and maybe fly over here by this soldier so that we can do an over-the-shoulder shot. Maybe mouse wheel in and sort of watch the scouts come through here. So now if we sort of scrub back a little bit and play, you can see that we've got a nice little edit here. And so we can do the same thing again as the scouts leave the shots here. We can go ahead and hit blade again and go into this shot. Now since the active camera is camera 1, we can still move the camera around. Just remember it like this. When you're in the clip editor, you can only use the camera manipulator on static cameras. If you want to modify a moving camera, I'll show you how to do that later in the motion editing tutorial. So let's go ahead and maybe have this shot end when the scouts are coming up and running near us. Now you'll notice at the end of the shot here, the sequence runs out. This is because the blue film strip actually defines the active playback range. We cut it off earlier in the previous tutorial, so I'm going to go ahead and extend the sequence and extend the shot. As I move the mouse over the edit point, you'll note that the cursor changes. And you can click on the end of the shot and just drag it out to extend it. So let's go ahead and move the camera so that the scout kind of runs right over us or something. That'll look pretty good. Let's see what that looks like. So we don't really want all these black frames. So let's go ahead and move the sequence end to the end of the shot. You can either grab the end of it or hit Alt-O. Again, up and down arrows to move between the shots. And there's our little sequence. So let's talk a little bit about working with edits. If you notice as I move my mouse over the shot, you can see that the cursor changes from editing the end point of this shot to editing a rolling edit between the 2 shots to editing the end point of the following shot. And it's good to think about it in terms of each clip has its own sense of time. So if you make the shot longer, you can actually repeat the same moment over and over again. You can actually see this if you put the camera into the work camera and then play time. As you cross the edit points, time will actually skip. You can also adjust the time window that the shot is looking at by sliding the media under the shot. To do this, hold down Control and Shift, note that the cursor changes, and as I click and drag on the shot, you can see that there's this yellow and black ticker tape that shows up, and as I slide it, you can see that I'm adjusting when the actions happen. So if I were to go through and go to the beginning of the shot here, you can see that there's this rocket, and if I want this shot to start right when the rocket is first fired, I can drag to the right, and now when I hit play, you'll see if I go back, if we watch that edit, you'll see that a rocket gets fired right as we cut. If you just left drag on the shot, you can drag the shot to the beginning to reorder it or drag it to the end to reorder it. You can Control C and Control V to copy and paste a couple shots. You can select those new shots and delete them. If you'd like to move the shot earlier in time and have it maintain its duration, you can hold down Alt and Shift and slide it earlier, which will adjust the edit points on the preceding shot and the shot following. It's also useful when you're sketching in a sequence to expand or contract time, basically make slow motion or high speed shots. So let's go ahead and blade a new shot and do that.
Let's move the camera in this shot so we can tell where it begins and ends. Just hold down Control, Alt, and Shift and drag on one of the edit points. Notice that the yellow and black media turns to green and black, and the text on the bottom of the shot actually changes to show you that this time scale is no longer 1.0. 1.0 is normal speed. If you need to reset a shot, you can right-click on it and get a context menu for that shot. Go up to Edit Clip and you can set the clip's name, the color, the overlay text, and one of the items is Set Time Scale. Just set it to 1.0 and tell it whether you'd like it to scale around the start, the middle, or the end of the shot, because it needs to change the length of the shot, and hit OK. As soon as you do, you'll see that the time scale goes back to 1 and it's a normal speed shot. If I wanted to delete this shot right now, when I hit delete, notice that it automatically moves the shot afterwards towards the left. Basically, it stops me from being able to create a gap. And now all the gap frames are at the end of the sequence. That's because the SFM is automatically collapsing time towards the start of the sequence. We added this because we were constantly getting black frames between the shots, and we just decided that auto collapse was better. So at this point, I recommend going ahead and recutting your shot up into a couple different kinds of sequences so you can get used to working with the camera and the edits at the same time to really embellish the moment or sort of bring out what you like about your scene. And when you're ready to move on, we'll talk about working with sound and track groups. And don't forget, hit Control S to save your work. So let's talk about working with sound and track groups. To do this, we're going to use a new layout. So let's go up to the window menu and go down to Layout and choose Sound Editing. You can see that all the windows sort of readjusted themselves, and now we have some more track groups below the normal film strip. Right-click on the track group that says Music. Choose Add Clip to Track, and this brings up a sound file browser that allows you to choose sounds. So there are a lot of audio files to sort through. So just like the map load dialog, we'll use the filter here to type in a string that will help us search for the sounds that we're looking for. Type in music, and that'll show us only files that have the word music in them. You can quickly browse through the sounds by using the up and down arrows. They'll automatically play as each one gets highlighted. I'm going to go ahead and select this 150 beats per minute one. Click on Open. And now you'll see we have a new clip that is pointing to that sound file. So we can right-click on it and tell it to show the waveform. We can drag it around just like a normal clip. If we go to the beginning of the sequence and hit I, we can trim it so that it's just basically starting exactly where the sequence starts. And it's a good idea to pay attention to where the start and end of every audio clip is. So I'll just go ahead and hit I and O to trim the start and end. Music is going. We've also got the secondary viewport up here, and it's tied to the work camera. I'll talk about that in just a second. But for right now, there's the sound. And let's go ahead and add a dialogue line here, maybe as the scout's running towards the soldier here. Maybe something along the lines of, I don't know, let's see what we got. So go to the, go ahead and close the music track group and go to the dialogue track group and right-click on it and say Add Clip to Track. And this one is going to be, let's pick a domination line. So I think we've got a bunch of scout domination lines.
Today,
so one of these should work.
I am today 400 them $200. I think I'll take Sasha out for a steak dinner tonight.
Maybe
what do you think about that?
Dominate soldier line.
You're a disgrace to you. Dismiss.
That sounds great. Okay, so here's a little audio file. If you control middle mouse wheel, you can adjust the height of a clip. If you right-click on it and say Show Waveform, it'll automatically show the waveform, and you can drag it around and place it where you want. So right here where the rocket is going by, let's go ahead and add a sound effect. So go down to the effects track here and right-click on the effects track and say Add Clip to Track. And I think we've got some maybe near miss. Looks like we got a bunch of near miss sounds. So go ahead and pick a near miss sound. That sounds good. So even though these are audio clips, they still have a lot of the same hotkeys and functions that you have for video clips. So you can still move them around, you can blade them, you can copy and paste them, and if you hold down Control, Alt, and Shift, you can lower their pitch. It's a good idea to keep an eye on where the audio clips start, because as you drag the shots around, any clip that starts inside that shot will get dragged with it. This is a really great feature for keeping your sounds in sync with the shots, and it lets you adjust edits, delete, or retime without having to worry about things getting out of sync. So I noticed that the audio for these explosions is kind of loud. You'll notice that in the track groups there's nothing in here for explosions, and that's because the audio for the explosions was actually recorded inside of the shot. So to go into a shot, go ahead and double click on the shot, and now you see track groups for each one of the takes that we recorded earlier. Open up the last track group and you can see there's a game sounds section where the explosions are. So if you right click on game sounds and you say set volume, you can set that volume to 0.15. To return to the sequence level, hit the up button, and if we play the movie, the rockets will be a little bit quieter.
Dismiss!
So this is looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and add a fade in and a fade out to some of the shots for a finishing touch. Just right click on the clip and say edit clip, set fade time. So in this case a 1 second fade time should be fine. The same thing works on audio clips, and you can fade in an audio clip in the same way.
Dismiss!
By the way, if the audio playback gets annoying while you're editing, there's a mute button on the top right of the timeline. So that's the basics of working with track groups and audio. Next up, let's talk about how to move things around in the scene with manipulators. So now that we've created a shot by capturing gameplay, let's talk about how to create a shot from scratch. To do this, we're going to import an asset from the game library and place it anywhere in the world using a 3D manipulator. Before we begin, let's go ahead and create a new empty shot. So let's go ahead and wave the mouse over the endpoint of the second shot and hold down the control key. Notice that the cursor changes. If we click and drag the edit to the right, we'll create a gap. Go ahead and right click on the gap and say replace with new clip. Note that it copies the current camera and creates an empty shot. So now that we've got an empty shot, let's go ahead and frame the camera to a new location in the map and do some set dressing. Notice that as we move the camera, both views are moving because they're both looking out of the active camera. So we'll go ahead and set the second view to the work camera, and let's go ahead and turn on the camera frustum so we can see the other camera moving around. So let's try making a reaction shot with a pyro sitting in a wheelbarrow. Let's place the camera on the side right about here, and now we're ready to go ahead and import our wheelbarrow. So let's talk about how to use the animation set editor. It's up here on the left. Since the shots can potentially record hundreds if not hundreds of thousands of things, you need a way to tell the SFM that these small number of things are the things that I actually care about. You sort of need a workbench of sorts. This workbench is called the animation set editor. This is where you're going to select things, adjust sliders, work with presets, copy, paste, delete, and run various rigging animation scripts. If you want to add something to a shot, this is where you're going to import new models into. So let's go ahead and show you how to do that. First, you have to select your shot and make sure the playhead is inside the duration of the shot. Next, you'll see on the upper left-hand side of the animation set editor is a plus button. If you click on this, you can see that there's a menu of operations. This is how to add things to a shot. So go ahead and look for an entry that says Create Animation Set for New Model. Go ahead and click on it to bring up the model browser. This is similar to the sound browser we used in the previous tutorial. This time it selects models. If you just try to scroll through this list, it can be pretty daunting to find the object that you're looking for. Over time you get used to working with the thousands of objects that make up a video game. If you're making your own custom models, just make sure they're placed inside the models directory and they'll show up in this list. But for right now, go ahead and type wheel, and this will show you only objects that have the word wheel in their name. On the bottom of the list should be the wheelbarrow. Go ahead and select it and click on open. And now you can see that we've got a wheelbarrow in the viewport, and if you look in the animation set editor, there is now a text entry that says wheelbarrow 1. So let's go ahead and talk about how to select it. In the Source FilmMaker, there are two concepts of selection: the object selection and the time selection. But right now we don't have any time selected because we're in the clip editor. To select time, we have to enter into the motion edit mode of the timeline. To do this, you can hit the button on the upper left-hand side of the timeline, or you can hit the tab hotkey. By default, when you enter into the motion edit mode, all of time is selected, and so you should see the entire timeline turn green. So now that we have time selected, let's go ahead and select the object. You can select it in two ways. You can either select it in the animation set editor by clicking on it, or if you want to select it in the viewport, hold down the control key and wave the mouse over the object. As the mouse moves over the joints inside of an object, you'll see the name of the joint highlighted. If you click on it, it will become selected. If you drag while holding down the control key, you can also lasso select objects. So now that we have all of time and an object selected, let's talk about using 3D manipulators. We have one for position, one for rotation, and one that can modify position and rotation at the same time, called the screen manipulator. So if you look on the lower left-hand corner of the primary viewport, you can see that there are buttons to switch between each one of these manipulators. Go ahead and click on the translation button. You can see that there is now a transform jack on the object. If you click and drag on the axes of this jack, you can either move it up or down, or if you click on the circle, you can move it in the plane defined by that circle. You'll also see a blue square in the center of the jack. If you click and drag on this, you'll move the object in screen space. So go ahead and work with this until you can get the object positioned over by that barrel. Alright, that looks pretty good. So now let's go ahead and spin the wheelbarrow around so it's facing us. Go ahead and click on the rotation button. And now you can see we have a rotation manipulator. Clicking and dragging on the outer blue ring will rotate the object in screen space. Clicking and dragging on one of the axes will rotate the object on that axis. And if you click and drag on the center, it will allow you to free rotate, kind of like you're grabbing a ball. So go ahead and click on the screen manipulator button now. Using this manipulator is a fast way to move between translating and rotating without having to switch tools. You'll note that there is a yellow square on the inside of the 3D manipulator. This is the translation square. If you click and drag on that, the object will move relative to screen. If you click and drag on the outer orange ring, the object will rotate relative to screen. And if you click and drag in the circular area between the two, the object will free rotate, as if you were clicking and dragging on a ball. On the left-hand side is the pivot handle. You can use this to drag the manipulator off of the object to get more precise rotations and translations. Double-click on it and it'll snap it back onto the object. So before we use this, let's talk briefly about using the floating modification layer. So you may have noticed that the time selection has turned orange. This is because it contains all the modifications that we just did to the wheelbarrow. Go ahead and hit the Enter key. This will apply the current manipulation into the object's motion. Notice that the time selection turned green again, indicating that there is no manipulation present. Click and drag on the screen space manipulator, and notice that the time selection turned orange again. If we hit the Escape key, all of the active manipulations will be discarded, and the object will go back to the state it was before we did the manipulation. Or, if we like all the manipulations and we want to keep them, we can hit the Enter key. So now let's apply all these techniques that we just learned to posing a character. Go ahead and click on the plus button inside the animation set editor again, and choose Create Animation Set for New Model. This time, type the word Pyro. Select the pyro and hit Open. You'll see that the pyro is now floating in front of the camera, just like the wheelbarrow was. Go ahead and put him inside the wheelbarrow using the same techniques that we used earlier. If you want to select a joint and rotate it, hold down the Control key and click on that joint. Repeat this process until you have a pose that you like. I'm going to go ahead and speed up time now so you can watch me do it. So hopefully this gives you an idea about how we build up shots from scratch. So since we added time to our shot, let's go ahead and extend the sequence and review our work.
Dismiss!
Next up, we'll talk about creating animation using time selection.
So now let's talk about how to generate motion from scratch in the SFM. All motion editing and animation that you do inside the SFM is based on the idea of what, when, how. What object or controls do you have selected? What time do you have selected? And how are you manipulating it? As you might recall from the earlier tutorial, selection has two components, control selection and time selection. So in this tutorial, we'll go ahead and talk about how to create custom time selections. So for our example, let's go ahead and animate the camera field of view. Maybe do a zoom out shot on the pyro. Select your shot, hit plus, create animation set for existing element, and choose the active camera for the shot. This time, instead of selecting the camera in the animation set editor, we're going to select a single slider control instead. Go ahead and hit the little plus button next to the camera, and you'll see a group that says All, and hit plus on that. And now you can see that all the controls for the camera are listed. So now we're going to go ahead and select just a single control. Click on Field of View, and you'll see that only one slider has become active in the slider bank. Now all the manipulations and time selections are just being applied to this one control. So just as before, hit the Tab key to enter into the motion editor so we can select some time and manipulate the slider. So since we know we want the camera to pull back from the pyro, let's go ahead and set the starting zoom for the camera. By default, we already have all times selected, so go ahead and drag the slider until you're zoomed all the way in. You'll see that the time selection turns orange, indicating that we have a manipulation present, and go ahead and hit the Enter key to apply this motion. Note that if we were to adjust the time selection before we hit the Enter key, we can create an animated transition. So let's go ahead and do that. Create our zoom out by dragging the field of view slider back to a wide angle lens. Notice that just as before, the time selection turns orange. This is because the time selection now contains a manipulation. We call this a floating modification layer. This is what makes it possible for us to adjust time after we've done a manipulation. It does this by keeping the modification layer floating over the existing motion until we're ready to bake it. So this time, let's adjust the time selection before we hit the Enter key. You may have noticed that there are two vertical zigzag edges on the right and left-hand side of the timeline. These are called the infinite time selection handles. If they're present, either all of time before or all of time after is currently selected. So to trim our time selection, all we have to do is click and drag on the infinite time selection handles, and that will detach them from the edge of the window, creating a partial time selection. If you want to reattach them, just drag the time selection back towards the edge of the window, and they'll reattach. You can also hit Ctrl A. If you'd like to move the time selection earlier or later, just click and drag on it and move to the right and left. Because the playhead gets used for a lot of different operations, we tend to use Control Spacebar to review our work. This will play the existing shot once, and then will return the playhead back to its current frame. You'll notice that as the time plays back, when it moves across the edge of the time selection, there's a small hitch in the motion. This is because the time selection is hard. If we want to make a soft time selection, you can go ahead and drag out a fall off by either clicking and dragging near the edges of the time selection or holding down the Shift mouse wheel. Note you can click and drag on these fall off regions to adjust them. And if you want to change the fall-off curve type, you can hit the hotkeys 1, 2, 3, and 4 to change the way that the attack or the decay for the current time selection works. By the way, you can drag on the top or bottom of a soft time selection to move it all at once. To preview animation changes, we recommend holding down the Shift key and waving the mouse to the right and to the left. This is a quick way of reviewing animation without having to constantly readjust the playhead location. This is important because if the playhead is outside of the time selection, when you do the manipulation, you won't see anything happen. The playhead must always be inside the time selection if you want feedback during the manipulation. When you're ready to continue, hitting the Enter key or changing selection either on time or on objects will automatically drop the floating modification layer. You can create a new time selection by holding down the Shift key and waving the mouse to the right and to the left until you find the exact frame that you'd like your time selection to start on. Go ahead and click and drag to the right, and you'll select a region of time. Note that doing this automatically drops the floating modification layer, and the time selection has turned green. Now let's talk about using procedural presets to modify an animation. You can think of these as filters that we apply to the motion through the time selection. You can find all the procedural presets in the upper right-hand corner of the animation set editor. Later we'll go into detail about what each one of them does. Go ahead and shift drag to select some time. And in the animation set editor, look for a preset called Jitter. Drag it to 100%. Notice that as we drag the slider, it jitters the existing motion data. You can see that the jitter updates as we adjust the time selection. Go ahead and hit Enter to apply this to the existing motion. Preview the results by holding down the Shift key and moving the mouse. Okay, so this doesn't look good. Let's talk about how to get rid of it. So if you want to delete all of the motion from an object, hit Ctrl A to select all of time. Drag the playhead till the object is in a state that you like, select the object, and then drag the playhead preset to 100%. Notice that the value at the playhead is being copied into the entire duration of the time selection. This means it's also possible to use this with partial time selections, or that you can incrementally apply the playhead preset to get interesting effects. We'll go over this more as it comes up. I'd go ahead and repeat this a couple times until you let it really sink in. When you're ready to review your work, hit Control Spacebar. To recap, you can create motion using 3 steps. Step 1, select an object or a control. Step 2, modify the slider, use presets, or use a manipulator. Step 3, adjust the time selection. And when you're happy with the results, hit the Enter key or change selection to apply the motion to the underlying object. What, when, how. And don't forget, hit Ctrl S to save your work. So now that we've talked about working with clips and time selections in the timeline, let's talk about working with curves. To do this, we're going to use a mode of the timeline called the graph editor. This is the editor that allows us to have precise curve-by-curve control over any parameter in the animation set, whether it's the X translation on the path of the camera or the Y translation on a joint on a character. To enter into the graph editor, click the graph editor icon on the top left of the timeline. You'll note that we have entered a new mode of the timeline, similar to the motion editor. Note that by default, when you hit the Tab key, you toggle between the clip editor and the motion editor. You can reprogram this Tab key behavior by pressing either of the motion edit or the graph editor buttons, and when you hit Tab, whichever button was last pressed, that editor will become active whenever you hit the Tab key. Experiment with this a bit until it makes sense. We find that we use both in practice, so get comfortable jumping back and forth between the two edit modes. Now let's keyframe some curves to create some camera motion. Before we start, let's go ahead and select our shot and make sure that the camera frustum and the work camera are being shown. If there's no animation set for the active camera, go ahead and create one. Go ahead and hit Tab to enter into the graph editor, and let's begin. First, select the animation set for the camera. Notice that we get a list of all the available channel controls on the object. If you've ever keyframed in a 3D animation system, this should feel very familiar. There's one fundamental difference, however. Even though it looks like a curve editor, we're actually still working with dense sample data. This is how we can work back and forth between working with time selections and working with curves. It makes working with captured data very easy. We'll talk more about this later. So let's create some curve motion. In the graph editor, select position X under the camera's transform. Drag the playhead to the start of the shot. Hit the M key to create a bookmark. Note that this creates a keyframe on the X translation channel for the camera. Drag the playhead to the end of the shot, and instead of hitting the M key, just click on one of the manipulators and move the camera. Notice that as soon as we clicked on the manipulator handle, a new keyframe was created. This is similar to auto key in a normal keyframer. Now let's frame the curve by hitting the F hotkey. Go ahead and left drag in the graph editor to select this keyframe, and middle drag up and down. Notice that it does the exact same thing as dragging on that particular control of the 3D manipulator. You can see that the viewport is updating as we drag. Just like the motion editor, we can zoom in and out with the mouse wheel, or we can hold down Shift mouse wheel to zoom vertically. You can also pan the view by holding down the Alt key and middle dragging. If you would like to step between the keyframes, go ahead and use the square brackets on the keyboard. This will jump time to the previous and next bookmark. You can also set the value of the currently selected keyframes by typing the value into the number field on the top of the timeline. You can also type in mathematical expressions if you'd like to just offset them. So for example, typing +=3 would add 3 to the selected keyframes, whereas typing only 3 would set the value to 3. So let's go ahead and show you an example of this. Select rotation Z on the camera, set a bookmark on the first frame using the M key, and go to the last frame and create another bookmark with the M key. Select it and type in 113. And now when we play back time, the camera is rotating 113 degrees around Z. If you want to scale the selected keyframes, hold down the Control key and drag with the right mouse button. The keyframes will scale around the current cursor position. Now let's show you how you can still use the motion editor in tandem with the graph editor. Enter the motion editor by hitting the motion edit button. Open up the camera animation set and then open up the transform and position control groups. Select the parameter for X translation. Look for the procedural preset jitter and drag it to the right. Go ahead and hit the graph editor button to return to the curve mode and activate offset mode. Note that we can still adjust the curve, but you can see that the jitter motion is still on the channel. If you don't want this, deactivate offset mode and adjust one of the tangent handles. This will vaporize all of the jitter motion in the affected region, creating a pure spline curve again. Congratulations, you've created your first curve in the graph editor.
Dismiss!
Now let's go over importing, puppeteering, and modifying captured motion. Let's start by creating a new scout and having him run past the camera in the foreground. Instead of recording or animating the scout motion, this time let's use a motion clip from the backlot of the existing game motion. Select the shot and enter into the motion editor. Use the plus button to create an animation set for a new model. Go ahead and type scout and look for the scout that's inside the HWM directory. These are the player models that get used on higher end machines and have more polygons and better facial controls. Select the scout and click on open. You'll see the scout is floating in front of the active camera, so use the screen manipulator to place him just out of frame. While you're dragging relative to screen on the scout, you can hold down the shift modifier, which will drag the manipulator along the world. Once you've got him in position, hit the E key to jump over to the rotate tool and spin him around so he's facing the direction that we want him to run. That looks pretty good. Now we're ready to import the motion. Right-click on the animation set called Scout 1 and choose Import Sequence. This brings up the activity browser that allows us to blend in the game motions before they get imported. You should see the word Ref on the top left. Click on this pull down and search for Run Primary. There's quite a few activities here on the character, so instead of browsing the scroll field by name, it's easier if you just click on the pull down again to close it and then use the up and down arrows. This will auto-play each activity as they are selected. Once you find Run Primary, click and drag on the Move X slider over to the right so that you can set the speed that you want the imported motion to be running at. Let's just set it at maximum speed. You should see the Scout running in place. Click on Open, and now the Scout should be running through your shot. He's probably not aimed in the right direction, so let's move and rotate him so his motion has him running through the shot in the foreground. Notice that the screen manipulator is outside of frame. It's often very powerful to move the screen manipulator off of the selected object by adjusting its pivot. Hit Alt-V to bring the manipulator to the center of the view. Now click and drag on the pivot handle on the left-hand side of it so that you can move the pivot in screen space. While you're dragging, hold down the Shift key to place it onto the Scout. Notice the yellow cursor that tells you where you're placing the pivot in space. Now, even though we can't see the Scout's root object off screen, we can still manipulate it. Go ahead and drag the manipulator to move the Scout into frame. If you hold down the Alt key while dragging on the screen space handle, you can adjust depth by waving the mouse to the right and left. Let's bring him a little bit closer. Learning to use the pivot and the screen manipulator to work with objects that are off of screen is worth mastering, especially when you're working with lights or eye targets. Go ahead and play around with it until you're comfortable. Hold down Shift and wave the mouse to the right and left to see how this looks. Alright, that looks alright. Now let's talk about another way to create motion. We're going to use puppeteering this time. So in the work camera, hold down the Control key and select the pyro's head. Hit the up arrow to go to the beginning of the shot. Now we're ready to puppeteer the motion of the pyro's head. To do this, we're going to use the screen manipulator. Click and drag on the free rotate handle for the pyro's head. Get it looking somewhere over to the right. When you're ready to puppeteer the motion, click down on the manipulator, and without letting up, tap the spacebar. Perform the manipulator while time is running, and hit stop when you're done. And now when you preview, you can see that we recorded some puppeteered manipulator motion. This same puppeteering technique works with 3D manipulators and with sliders. I recommend playing around with it until you get the hang of it. We find that after we puppeteer a motion, usually only a portion of it is usable. Let's trim the performance by adjusting the time selection on the floating modification layer. This little section right here seems like the useful part. This would probably look better if it happened earlier. Let's talk about how to retime something. As you may have noticed, when we adjusted the time selection, the motion underneath was staying fixed in time. If you want your adjustments to the time selection to affect the motion, you have to hold down the Alt key. Alt dragging on the time selection is how you move the motion earlier or later. Or, if you resize the time selection, make something slower or faster. Motion puppeteered with manipulators relies on the precision of the mouse. Usually this is pretty low res, and so the motion needs to be smoothed out afterwards. To do this, go ahead and use the procedural preset Smooth. When I block in motion, I tend to puppeteer over and over again, blending in different takes until I get the result that I like. Before I puppeteer a motion, I like to copy all of the existing motion so that I can use it later if I need to. Select all of time, and hit Ctrl-C to copy the current motion for the selected controls into the clipboard. Later, we can use the Paste preset, or Ctrl-V, to apply it back to the time selection. Now you can go ahead and modify the object however you want, and then when you're ready, select a region of time and use the Paste preset. This will crossfade that region of time back to the stored snapshot. Refine the time selection until you like the results, and then hit Enter to drop the modification layer into the motion. All of the animation techniques that you've learned in the last few tutorials were all designed so that you could modify any motion no matter how it was created, whether it was keyframed, imported, or captured from the game. Let's use what we've learned to modify the recorded camera motion on the first shot. Just as before, select the shot, click on the plus button, and this time we're going to choose Create Animation Set for Existing Element. This will bring up a dialog that shows you all of the elements that have been recorded into the selected shot. Go ahead and choose whatever camera is your active camera for the current shot. You can check this by looking at the bottom right of the viewport to see what the active camera name is. So let's select the camera animation set and hit Tab. So before we start modifying the camera motion, let's copy it to the clipboard so that we can paste it back in later. Drag the playhead to the end of the shot so we can make the camera look like it's hitting the rocket. Click and drag on the manipulator to move it into place. You can also use the viewport as a manipulator. We use this a lot to puppeteer camera motion. When you're ready to review your work, hit Control Spacebar. Notice that it's kind of a little bit broken there at the beginning because we moved it over. So now adjust the time selection and pull out a long fall off. Notice that in the viewport there's a 3D motion path that shows us the translation of the camera. It updates as we manipulate, adjust the time selection, or change the fall off curve type. Let's change the fall off curve type to 2. Wave the mouse while holding down Shift to preview. So go ahead and experiment with this until you get a camera move that you like. I'll go ahead and speed up time so you can see how I do it. Don't forget you can blend in the paste preset to reveal back to the earlier state if you need to. And hit enter when you like the result. Now let's talk about how to use locks. A lock is the most common way to put a hat on a character, a gun in a hand, or lock a camera to a character's face. Conceptually, a lock is a way to parent any 3D object onto any other 3D object in the scene. When you activate or deactivate a lock, all the motion on the object gets recomputed to counter-animate so that it moves in the exact same way, even though it has a new parent. This means changing the lock state doesn't visibly change the motion. Don't worry if this is a little bit difficult to understand at first. Once you get the hang of it, locks are one of the most intuitive and powerful features of the motion editor. So let's go ahead and create a close-up of one of these scouts as they're running. We'll use a lock to generate the camera motion. First, let's create the shot by using the blade, drag the playhead, and hit B. That looks alright. Select the new shot, and just as before, we need to create our animation sets. Go ahead and say create animation set for existing element. And this time choose camera 1 and scroll down in the list here of models and look for the scout. Notice that as we select each one of the scouts, their root joint is highlighting. Let's go ahead and pick the one in the front and click OK. Hit Tab to enter into the motion editor. Now open up the camera controls and notice that next to the transform control on the camera is a checkbox. This checkbox shows the lock state on the object. To change the lock state on an object, you can either click on it to lock it to the world, or drag and drop another object onto the lockbox. If you want a locked object to stick onto its new parent, you must first delete the motion on the locked object, and then adjust the time selection for when you want it to stick to the parent. So let's go ahead and do this. Select the camera's animation set, and use the view manipulator to move the camera closer to the scout's head. That looks pretty good. Next, let's hold down the Control key and click on the joint for the scout's head. Notice that the animation set for the scout has opened up, showing us the joint hierarchy, and that the scout's head is now selected. Now we'll create the lock. In the animation set editor, click and drag on the joint name bip_head and drop it onto the lock box for the camera's transform. You can see that the lock icon appears. Note that if we preview time with the Shift key, nothing has changed yet. Even though the camera's new parent is the head moving forward, the camera is moving backwards at the exact same speed, holding itself still. We can still manipulate the camera even though it's locked, but if we were to rotate the head joint, you can see that the camera is parented. So I don't really want this head rotation, so I'm going to discard the modification layer by hitting the Escape key. To get the camera to track along with the head, we just need to remove the counter animation on the camera. Let's do this the same way we would for any object that needs to have its motion deleted. Drag the playhead till the object is in a state that you like, select the object, and then drag the playhead preset to 100%. Hit Control Spacebar to review, and you can see that the camera is now tracking along with the scout's head. Turn off the lock, and you can see that the scout's head motion has been rotoscoped onto the camera in world space. Once we apply the modification layer, it just becomes dense sample data again. This means that we can keep refining over and over again until we get it just right. This might take a moment to sink in, but mastering this is worthwhile. So now let's blend in some of his chest movement and rotation so that his head isn't just locked in the center of the view. To do this, we'll repeat the steps we did before.
So let's go ahead and select spine 3, drag it onto the camera's transform, fade in the playhead preset by about half, and review again. This is basically blending in the chest motion with the motion that we just made. Objects can also be locked onto the world. The most common use of this is to make an object or a joint maintain its world space orientation. Let's go ahead and do this for the camera so that we can make it look a little bit less like a locked off helmet cam. Drag the playhead to a frame where the camera rotation looks good. Now go to the animation set editor and open up the transform on the camera. You should see 2 controls, one for rotation and one for translation. Click on the lockbox next to rotation to lock it to the world. Next, select only the rotation control and apply the playhead preset. Now the camera's orientation will be locked in world space. Hit Control Spacebar to review. Note that the camera is keeping its world space orientation, and the scout's head is sort of wobbling around in frame a little bit. It would probably look a little bit better if we left in some of the head rotation. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Escape to discard that modification layer, and this time I'm only going to apply the playhead preset by about half. Hit Control Spacebar to review. Alright, we're done with that. Let's go ahead and hit Enter to apply the motion and unlock. And don't forget, hit Control S to save your work. Now that we have a close-up shot of the scout's face, let's make him talk. First, let's adjust the sound clip so that he starts talking just before the shot. Open up the dialogue track group and drag the sound clip that we added earlier. Hit Control Spacebar to review. Okay, let's go ahead and add some lip sync. First, right-click on the scout's dialogue clip and choose Show Waveform. This will make the waveform for that clip be drawn regardless of whether it's selected or not. Only waveforms that are set to draw are used during automatic lip sync. I think we might have turned on the waveform for the music, so let's go ahead and turn that off. Right-click on it and say Hide Waveform. Okay, now just the scout's line is showing its waveform. Since we already have the scout's animation set, we just need to open it up and look for a control group called Face. Right-click and choose Extract Phonemes. Click on Extract, hit Control Spacebar to review, and the scout should be talking. Alright, so let's change the line. Select the audio file and tap the V hotkey to mute it. Right-click on it to hide the waveform. And now I'll show you how to record a scratch dialogue line. First, put on your headset or turn on your system's microphone and make sure it's working. And then move the mouse over the track group you want to record into. Tap the Y key and say whatever you'd like. Good job, buddy! Hit Y when you're done, and you can see that it created an audio file for us. Drag the position of the sound clip so it happens during the shot, and then right-click to show the waveform of our new scratch track, and then right-click on the face and say Extract Phonemes. And now you'll see the scout is talking along with our new scratch track. Good job, buddy! Now let's refine the automatic lip sync and make it look a little bit better. In the animation set editor, open up the face group and select the lower face and tongue control groups. Hit Tab to return to the motion editor, and now you can see we have some rough motion data for all the scout's mouth sliders. Right-click on the timeline and choose Show Waveform. Now you can see that the sounds that we use to generate the lip sync data are in the background of the motion editor. So first I'm going to go ahead and use the procedural preset Smooth to make the motion just a little bit smoother. Drag it to the right, and you can see that the motion curves are smoothing out a little. So now when we play, you can see that the motion is just a little bit sort of muddier. We've probably softened out some of the plosives. Let's select some time around where the E shape is happening at the end. You can hear the audio scrubbing as we shift drag to time select. If this gets annoying and you don't need it, you can hit the mute button up here on the top right of the timeline. Above the presets, you can see that a few more tabs have been added. This is because we're using a face, so we have some presets that are associated with the faces. The ones for phonemes were the ones that were actually used to generate the automatic lip sync. So that means we can go down and drag the P_EY preset to the right to apply it to the time selection, which will recreate the E shape for his mouth. Maybe we should add in a little bit more of the smile target. Maybe his lip is a little too high. Let's lower his lip up V a little bit. Keep refining until you like it. That's alright. Okay, now let's talk about how to pose the eyes. Inside of the Scout's animation set for face, you'll see a group called Eyes. Click on it. Now, it's selected, but it's somewhere outside of the view, and I don't really want to go fishing for it. So what I'm going to do is aim the work camera at it by tapping the V hotkey.
Make sure the viewport has focus, otherwise the hotkey won't work. Okay, it looks like the scout's view target is under the ground. Hit Ctrl A to select all of time. So let's reset the view target's recorded motion by applying the preset named Default to the time selection. Since the view target is a child of the root transform, you can see that it's now moving along underneath the scout's feet. Let's rotate it up into position using the screen manipulator. Just as before, let's set up the pivot of the manipulator first. In the primary viewport, hit Alt-V to bring the manipulator pivot to the center of the screen. Now click and drag on the pivot handle, and while dragging, hold down the Shift key to slide the pivot along the world. Place it right between his eyes. Now we can use the free rotate handle to rotate his eyes around in his head, even though the view target is outside of the frame. Click and drag near the bottom of the rotate handle, and drag the mouse upward until you see the eyes come into view. Drag until they're looking at a location that you like. Alright, that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and hit Enter to apply this motion. Let's adjust his head a little so we can see his eyes a bit more. Hold down Control and select BIP_head. Now rotate his head up a little bit. Okay. You can also use the left, right, up, down sliders on the eye controls, but these are all happening relative to the view target. So usually what happens is people ignore the view target, it's looking down at his feet, and as soon as they start rotating the head, the eyes just start freaking out. So it's good to think of the sliders as just an offset on top of what the view target is doing. Now let's pose his face. In the animation set editor, click on the control group Upper Face. Let's grab his mid-face too. Go ahead and shift-click on it to add it to the selected controls. Note that the slider bank is now filled with muscle control sliders for his upper face. So now let's pose with the slider manipulator. Look for a slider called Frown and drag it up to about halfway. Let's do the same thing for cheek V and nose V as well. Alright. All of the TF characters in the Source FilmMaker are using a combinatorial facial animation system. This means that when you drag multiple sliders at the same time, they all work in concert together. Behind the scenes, there are hundreds of corrective shapes, all making sure that bad slider combinations don't wreck the face. This means that it takes a while for you to learn how to play these faces, but we have some of the poses that we like stored as presets. You can use these presets to quickly adjust multiple sliders at the same time while you're getting the hang of it. Click on the preset group called Emotion, and look for a preset called Happy Small Upper, and drag it over to the right. Notice that as we drag, the scout's face is changing, and we are adjusting multiple sliders at once inside the slider bank. Note that as soon as you let go of the preset slider, it resets. That's because it's not actually an animatable control. It's like a master fader system that allows you to quickly modify lots of controls without having to select them one by one. But we'll talk more about how to create custom presets later. This is a bit like learning to play a piano, and it can take some skill to get it right. But once you learn to play these controls, you can really make these characters act. Go ahead and experiment. And don't forget to save your work.
Good job, buddy.
In this tutorial, I'll introduce you to animating characters with an IK rig. As you may have noticed when posing the pyro from the earlier tutorial, it's easy to accidentally mess up the posing of a joint by adjusting one of its parents. Let's break this on purpose by puppeteering some pelvis rotation on the pyro. You can see that as I rotate, the head, hands, and feet are now all in the wrong place. So I'm going to hit Escape to discard that modification, and this time I'm going to lock the head rotation to the world, so that when I rotate, the head's animation stays in the same orientation. Select the pelvis, and hit the up arrow to go to the head of the shot, and get ready to puppeteer some pelvis rotation. Hit the spacebar, and hit spacebar to stop. Locking the orientation works fine for the head, but for something like the hands and feet where the position matters, we're going to need to drive the elbows and knees with inverse kinematics. So let's create an IK rig. Right-click on the pyro's animation set and look for the Rig menu and choose Rig Biped Simple. This creates the IK rig. This only works on the skeletons for the 9-player classes of Team Fortress. You can make your own custom rigs and skeletons, but we'll go over that later. Now let's take a deeper look at the IK rig. You can see that the animation set controls are now color-coded and organized a little bit better, and some of the joints are now hidden. You can right-click to show hidden joints if you need to. In the viewport, if you hold down the Control key, you can see that the skeleton now has elbow and knee pole vector controls. Once the motion is traced from the FK skeleton onto the IK rig, the motion gets deleted from the joints and the IK rig becomes active. The result is that the IK rig's motion looks exactly the same as it did before. However, now, if we rotate the pelvis, you can see that the feet and hands stay put. Note if we rotate too far, or the IK control gets out of range, the joints driven by the rig will just point back to the IK controls. This means you must animate the IK controls to stay within range of the limbs that they control. So it looks like the feet and hand controls are in the right place on the first frame of the shot. So let's put the playhead on that frame and lock them in space. Select all the hands, elbows, knees, and feet, and lock them to the world. And now place the motion path on the tip of the toe using Control middle mouse click. This places the display path on the surface of the model, by the way. Now delete the counter animation from the locked joints by applying the playhead preset. Notice that the motion path is updating. Go ahead and review. And now you can see that when the pelvis is rotating, the feet are staying on the ground and the hands are staying on the wheelbarrow. So now let's talk about lighting and final picture. Let's start by creating some custom lighting for a shot. By default, the SFM is using the same lighting as the game, which uses a combination of spotlights and environment cubes to fake radiosity. However, since we know where the camera is, we can sweeten up the lighting a bit by adding additional spotlights. You can add as many lights as you want into each shot, but we only allow 8 of them to cast shadows. So let's add a new light to this pyro shot. Select the shot and enter the motion editor by hitting Tab. Go to the plus button and choose Create Animation Set for New Light. Now we have a new light that is looking down the active camera. Let's move it into a new location. Select it, just as before, hit Alt-V to bring the manipulator to the center of the screen. Drag the pivot handle, and hold down the Shift key to slide the manipulator along the world. Let's place the manipulator for our light on the wheelbarrow. Next, click and drag upward on the bottom of the free rotate handle. Notice that the light is now shining down on our scene. You can also place the lights using a view manipulator. Drag the animation set for a light into the secondary viewport. The viewport is now set up to act as a manipulator for the light. Notice that the active camera toggle button now says Light 1 instead of the work camera or the active camera. Click and drag in the viewport and you can see that the light is moving around in the scene. If we rotate the manipulator, you can see that the viewport is also updating. The field of view on the camera will adjust the field of view on the light. If we mouse wheel while manipulating the camera, you can see that the horizontal FOV slider is updating, which means that we can also drag the slider and you can see that the FOV is updating in the view. In the primary viewport, let's place the pivot on the ground by dragging the pivot handle and holding down the Shift key. Next, switch to the Rotate tool. It looks like that's the local rotation axis of the light, so let's switch the Rotate manipulator to be in world space by holding down the Shift key and clicking on the Rotate tool again. Note that the rotation axes are now aligned to the world. Click and drag on the blue Rotate handle and spin the light around in the scene. Maybe rotate it down in screen space so it looks like it's a rocket explosion happening on the left side of the screen. It's looking a little bit bright, so let's drag the intensity slider down a bit. Now let's drag the green and blue sliders down to give it kind of an orange tint. Alright, that looks alright. Let's make the light volumetric. Right-click on the light's animation set and choose Enable Volumetrics. Now look for the volumetric intensity slider and drag it up. Alright. Let's tweak the light a little bit more. Maybe drag the far Z attenuation a little bit down so that the light doesn't actually reach that back wall. Okay. Now we're ready to animate the intensity of the light. Let's go ahead and drag the intensity slider to 0 and then we'll turn back on with a partial time selection. So let's select the region of time where we want the explosion to happen. Hold down Shift to preview, and then drag out a region of time to be our fade in fall off. Without letting go of the Shift key, drag out a second region of time, and this will automatically create a fade out fall off. That looks alright. Let's drag the intensity slider up and preview. Let's jitter the light intensity a little. Open up the light's animation set and select just the intensity slider. Now drag the jitter preset. Okay, let's show you another way to create a light. We found that we were constantly making a key, a rim, a fill, and a bounce light, so we wrote a little rigging script that makes a light kit using the selected transform and the active camera. So go ahead and hit Tab and let's scrub over to the Scout's close-up shot. Select the shot and hit Tab. Hit Ctrl-A to select all of time. Before we create the light kit, it's a good idea to turn down the exposure on the camera a little bit. Select the camera and drag the slider called Tone Map Scale down a little. This will darken the scene. Next, Control-select the Scout's head in the viewport, and in the Animation Set Editor, right-click on the selected joint and look for the DAG Utilities menu. These are Python scripts that we wrote for doing handy operations. You should see one that says Create Lights. Notice that this creates 4 lights and the Light Kit control group. Select the Light Kit and rotate it relative to screen until you get something that you like. You can also go and refine each of the lights from here if you need to. That looks alright. Bear in mind that we created this light at the location of the playhead, so if we preview, you can see that the scout is just running right through the lighting. So let's lock the light kit to his head. Open up the light kit and drag BIP head onto its transform, and then apply the playhead preset. Review. Okay, that looks alright. I have to sneeze. Next, let's add some film grain. Hit Tab to return to the clip editor, and right-click on the Overlay Effect track group. Choose Add Clip to Track, and select the Material Overlay Effect. This allows you to put images or animated textures over the viewport. You can see that it created a clip, so let's zoom out and make this clip last for the entire sequence. If you want to make a graphic for a title card, you can make a short overlay clip, but usually you want the grain to happen over the entire movie. Right-click on the clip, and choose Show in Element Viewer. This is an editor we've been trying to keep away from you until you knew a little bit more about the system. This might look like an outliner, but it's not. The Element Viewer has very few safeguards in it and will allow you to hack the running memory of the SFM session. If you are a person who likes to tweak knobs to find out what they do, be very careful in here. You can corrupt your scene into an unrecoverable state if you don't know what you're doing. Now that I've told you all that, go ahead and click on the text field where it says Name and rename the clip to be called Grain. Notice that the clip in the timeline updates immediately to be called Grain as well. Next, click on the button next to the material, and this brings up a list of all the materials in TF. Type Grain into the filter. Choose pgrain.vmt. This is an animated texture that we like using for our grain, and click Open. Now let's adjust the opacity of the grain by clicking on the overlay color in the element viewer. This brings up the color picker, and let's drag the alpha opacity down to about 20%. You can see that the grain is updating as we drag. Alright, that looks okay. So let's dock the element viewer next to the animation set editor. Drag on the tab and you can see that it attaches to the window. Next, let's add a vignette clip. We could just add it the same way we added the grain, but this time let's just copy and paste the grain clip and redefine it. Hit the home key and go to the start of the sequence. Select the grain clip in the timeline and hit Ctrl-C to copy and Ctrl-V to paste. You should see that we have two clips. Drag one of them into the element viewer and rename it to Vignette and click on the Browse button. Type VIG in the filter and select Vignette 01. Now let's adjust the opacity of the overlay color to be about 90%. Okay, you can see that it's getting darker around the edges. Now let's add some color correction. Right-click on the Effects Track group and select Add Clip to Track, and this time choose Color Correction Effect. Drag the new clip into the element viewer and rename it to CC or Color Correction, whatever you want. Next to the file name field, click on the Browse button and click the Up button until you're in the Game folder. Now let's browse down into TF Movies, Materials, and Correction. This is where we keep all the color corrections that we use most often. I'll teach you how to make custom ones later, so for now let's just go ahead and choose the color correction called Fluorescent. Now you can see that the scene has a bluish-green tint to it. Let's adjust the intensity of the color correction by setting its weight to about 0.75. Okay, let's drag out the duration of the color correction clip so it covers the whole sequence, and review our work. Okay, that looks alright. Let's go ahead and save our scene and export our movie.
Dismissed!